Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and for more than 20 years, the single strongest voice defending the state of Israel on the American scene has been that of Alan Dershowitz, Professor Emeritus of Harvard Law School, the author of countless books describing the legitimacy and wonder of the Jewish state, including The Case for Israel, as well as The Case Against Israel's Enemies, exposing Jimmy Carter and others who stand in the way of peace. Also, The Case for Moral Clarity, Israel, Hamas, and Gaza. Terror Tunnels, the case of Israel's just war against Hamas. And the book he wrote in 2018 entitled The Case Against BDS, Why Singling Out Israel for Boycott is Anti-Semitic. And I'm so pleased to welcome Alan back to L'Chaim once again to talk with us about his recent book describing his long and illustrious relationship with the state of Israel, a marvelous, fabulous memoir entitled Defending Israel, the story of my relationship with my most challenging client. It is wonderful, as always, to have you at this table. Thank you for joining us. And
My pleasure.
Thank you for writing this book. By the way, when did you've written so many books about Israel. Now it's a memoir of, this takes us from your early childhood to today.
Yeah.
It shows us the twists and turns, who you met with, who you came in contact with.
Right.
It deals with every major issue dealing with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and Israel today. At some point, you decided to write this book.
Right.
When and why?
Well, it was 70 years since I started supporting Israel. It was Israel's 70th anniversary. It all started with Noam Chomsky back in Camp Masad in 1948 when he was a young Shomer HaTzair Zionist, and I was, just a kid, a 10-year-old kid. But to go to Camp Masad in the summer of 1948 when Israel declares its independence and is fighting for its survival really put me in connection with Israel in a very deep way, and that connection has maintained itself. And I tell the stories of the ups and downs of my relationship with Israel. I've known every Israeli prime minister since Golda Meir.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and I've known every American president in the last many, many years. And I talk about the relationships between each president and prime minister. And, just a few days ago, Bibi Netanyahu called me. He calls me from time to time just to schmooze or to get advice or to get my point of view. And obviously, President Trump calls me about my advice. President Obama called me about my advice relating to Israel. President Bush, President Clinton. So I have a long history of deeply caring about and advising leaders on Israel, and I wanted to write about it.
I want to read a paragraph from Defending Israel. I've said this to you others. How much writing do you do? How do you just pump these books out one after the other? How do you do that?
I write every single day. I don't let a day go by where I don't write 2,000 or 3,000 words. I don't type. So I do everything by hand.
On a legal pad?
On a yellow legal pad. I've now learned to do short pieces on my iPhone. Just short pieces full of typos. But I can do it.
The only time I've ever heard that before is when Elie Wiesel said to me, if he doesn't write something every day, he feels terrible.
Well, I understand that. Elie and I talked about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to read the book is beautifully written. And again, when you see somebody on television, they say, oh, I'm sitting with the author and he wrote a wonderful book. It's not always true. Here, this is one of the most important books written about the state of Israel, both historically and in terms of the issues that may have been, I don't know, I have not seen a book like this. And again, I've seen Alan's other books and they were wonderful. I'm hoping you picked this book up. Okay, so anyway, this is a paragraph, just give you a sense of it. The intensity of my own role in defending Israel has varied inversely with Israel's popularity around the world, and especially on university campuses, where I have spent nearly all my life, more than 60 years. As disproportionate, an undeserved demonization of Israel has increased exponentially, so too have my time and efforts. To the point that I now devote a majority of my professional priorities to defending Israel and its supporters. This will continue as long as Israel is unjustly attacked and I have the energy to respond to false accusations with credible defenses.
But I wrote that before the recent situation with the 92nd Street Y not allowing me to defend Israel from the lectern of the 92nd Street Y, with other groups trying to silence me. There are efforts to try to silence my voice on Israel by Jewish groups, and that's despicable. And it's despicable because it's based on a false charge that I have disproved, and they know it. And they admit it.
These are the sexual charges.
Growing out of Jeffrey Epstein by a woman I never met, by a woman who falsely accused many, many, many other people. So I won't allow my voice to be silenced, but I have to tell you, it's been harder to get my voice heard because organizations like the 92nd Street Y engage in McCarthyism. And on the basis of an accusation, they won't let me speak at the 92nd Street Y in defense of Israel. Shame on the 92nd Street Y.
I'm afraid so. But I want you to take a step back.
Yeah.
Because there were times it was hard for you to get on campus or to be free to speak on campus when you got there, even before the Epstein issue.
Yeah, but they would have protests. I was invited, but they would have protests. In one case, they drew a Hitler mustache on my picture. In another case, they drew swastikas and had anti-Semitic cartoons about me. But I
in
always
this book,
spoke.
you have a picture that was done of you as a Nazi.
Right.
It is horrible.
Yeah, but it happens very commonly on college campuses.
And where is the protest coming from?
The hard left, only the hard left on college campuses, including the Jewish Voice for Peace, which is not Jewish. Doesn't care about peace, and fortunately has not much of a voice, but it's a terrible, terrible organization. Code Pink, Antifa, all the hard left groups want to silence me, but now to be joined by the 92nd Street Y, joining with these anti-Semites is just a scandal.
We've said even on the earlier program we did together that it is very disappointing to see that the assault against free speech comes from the hard left, more than from the right.
Right.
And what's interesting is the issue of intersectionality is thrown up as the reason. In other words, for people who only hear that as a word, intersectionality means that people who share a common sense of oppression join together. There's intersectionality. And if you are an oppressed person, you empathize with and support any other.
It's a totally phony concept, though. What do very, very fundamentalist Muslims have in common with gay and lesbian people? They throw them off the roofs, they kill them, they murder them, but they have a common enemy, Jews in Israel. So they claim that they have common basis for oppression. It's total nonsense. And intersectionality is simply a fancy academic way of excluding Jews and Zionists from the conversation, and we're fighting back.
Is anti-Zionism on the college campus a form of anti-Semitism?
If it singles out only Israel and says only the Jews have no right to a state, the Palestinians have a right to a state, they can apply Sharia law, but Israel has no right to be a nation state of the Jewish people, that's a form of anti-Semitism. Yes.
And when isn't it?
Well, it isn't when you just criticize Israeli policies. You
That's
can
not being
criticize the settlement, you can criticize...
But that's not being anti-Zionist.
No, of course not. Anti-Zionism would be as if you said there's no room for there to be any black majority countries. To say that you can't have a nation state of the Jewish people that represents Jewish values, there are so many other ethnic groups and religious groups that have states. to single out Israel alone, that's anti-Semitism.
Okay. So here I have Alan Dershowitz, who is the greatest defender Israel has had in the last 70 years. I want him to answer the hardest question that is on the minds of young people and also lovely, committed Jews who are even committed to the state of Israel. But they're very troubled by the question I'm going to give you.
Sure.
And I want to hear how you would answer it. I want to take as much time. There's no question that it's more important for us to hear you try to answer. The bottom line was expressed in Ari Shavit's book, My Promised Land, in which the basic thesis was, we definitely need the state of Israel. But the state of Israel was born on the backs of the Palestinians.
Right.
We destroyed a people and stole a land. The biggest, when you scratch and move all of the rhetoric aside, what really drives many Jews to feel in some way almost they're uncomfortable with Israel in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Well, they shouldn't be.
Just a minute. Is that, bottom line, they feel that we stole somebody else's land.
Well, if they're talking about Australia, I would understand that argument. If they're talking about New Zealand, I would understand that argument. If they're talking about Canada, I would understand that argument. If they were talking about the United States, you could even make a plausible case of stealing land. But Israel is exactly the opposite. Israel was a Jewish nation for so many years. They were then expelled. And let's just move to modern history. Modern history, the Palestinian people had a leader during the Second World War. The leader was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. He went to Berlin and worked with Hitler, was a Nazi war criminal, wanted by Nazi war criminals. He was given asylum. His picture was in the homes, his picture with Hitler in the homes of many, many Palestinians. And then comes 1948. The Jews are displaced. 6 million of them are killed. Hundreds of thousands of them are in displaced person camps. And the United Nations decides to do the fair thing based on the Balfour Declaration, the Sykes, you name it, treaty after treaty, divide a disputed land into two. And they give Israel a tiny bit of arable land on the coast, and they give the Palestinians the vast majority of arable land on the West Bank and other places. Israel
Are you saying, by the way,
Yeah.
that the League of Nations gave Arab land to the Jews?
No, they gave
Because that's what you
disputed
just.
land. Oh, no.
But you, by the way, out of your mouth
Yeah.
comes the. It's so common parlance now.
Look, it was
didn't
land
mean it.
owned by the Ottoman Empire. It had Arab people living on it, many of whom came to Israel attracted by Jewish settlements there because it gave them jobs. And in 1948, the Palestinians could have had a state. They could have had a state in 1967. They could have had a state in 1937, 1938, when the Peel Commission offered them a state. The Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. They don't know how to take yes for an answer. Of all the groups that have been displaced over history, they have one of the weakest claims to statehood, certainly compared to the Kurds. The Kurds have a much stronger claim. The Tibetans have a much stronger claim. The Armenians who live divided in other places have strong claims. There is finally an Armenian state after too many years. And Israel has always been willing to divide the land, the mandate land. They were offered a state in 2000, 2001. They rejected it and instead went to war and did the Intifada. They were offered a state in 2008 by Ehud Olmert. So you can't say that Israel was built on the back of Palestinians or Arabs when they were always willing from 38 on to create a division and have a Jewish state and an Arab Muslim state. But that's not what the Palestinians wanted. They wanted there not to be a Jewish state. That was the key element of their desire.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you what an individual who disagrees with us would say to you.
Right.
Aren't you magnanimous? You come to a people, take their land, and then say to them, I'll give half of it back to you, or I'll share it with you.
Yeah, but that's
just
nonsense.
a minute.
Yeah.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
Of course, The Jew, they say, is willing to share the land because it wasn't theirs to begin with, and they came back, meaning that the first wave of Aliyah happens at the end of the 19th century, and then there's waves of Aliyah in the early part of the 20th century, and then there's a large influx of Jews after World War II and after the Holocaust.
Sure.
And there are many historians that believe that Great Britain and the world, in the 30 years after 25 years after the League of Nations mandate that takes the whole Ottoman Empire and slices it up artificially in ways that make no sense at all.
Right.
In that period of time, the mood changed. And that the only reason the League of Nations and the world gave the Jews the state of Israel in 47, 48 was because of the Holocaust. And Barack Obama goes to Cairo, and the first speech he gives,
He was wrong.
he says Israel is there because of the Holocaust.
He's wrong.
Okay, but the argument that you will hear is,
I hear it every day.
You will
Yeah.
hear is, it's unfair to say to the Palestinian, "We'll share the land. Why won't you?" When the Palestinians' perspective, reflected in Shavit's book, is, wait a minute, this was mine to begin with.
Well, first of all,
so now you're saying you'll take it, but give some of it back to me.
First of all, it wasn't theirs to begin with.
Explain
Let's
why
be
that's
very
true.
clear.
Yes,
There's
why?
been a Jewish presence in what was then called Palestine, for many years. In 1835 or 6, they did the first census of Jerusalem, and the Jews were a majority. There were more Jews than there were a combination of Muslims and Christians. Jews lived in Tzfat. Jews lived in Hebron. There were massacres of Jews in Hebron in 1929. So the history of Israel doesn't begin with the Holocaust, but if it did, the world owed Israel a nation state. No country in history, no people in history were more deserving of a state than a people who wiped out while the world stood by and did nothing to help at all. And remember, the Palestinian leadership was complicit with the Nazis. It would not have been unfair for the world to turn all of Palestine over to the Jewish people as reparations for what the world, with the aid of the Palestinian leadership, had done. So it wasn't magnanimous for the Jews to give back something. This was, Jews are the aboriginal population of what is now Israel, and they built it on the sweat of their brow. Israel was not established by the UN. It was not established by the Balfour Declaration. It was not established by the League of Nations. It was established by Jews, individual Jews, not colonialist Jews, Jews who were escaping from colonialist powers, who came and indigenously built this. You can make exactly the same argument for America. Except Americans weren't here to begin with. Canadians weren't here. Australians, New Zealanders weren't here. Why doesn't the world demand that New Zealand give back the country to the Maoris, or to the Australians give back to the Aboriginal people, or Canada, the United States? History unfolds according to events that occurred, and the events that occurred include the Holocaust. Yes, a lot of Jews came to Israel as the result of the Holocaust, but certainly it wasn't their fault. It was the fault of the world for allowing it to happen. If Israel had existed during the Holocaust, millions of Jewish lives could have been saved. There's never been a stronger case for a group of people to have a nation state than for Israel to have a nation state. And it's been magnanimous, offering the Palestinians over and over again statehood, with the Palestinians rejecting it.
How much history do you feel American Jews know about?
Very little.
Very little.
Very little.
What about Nancy Pelosi?
I like her.
I'm happy you like her, but
Yeah.
my question is, we've had members of Congress, Democratic freshmen, fresh women of Congress, say some terrible things about the state of Israel.
That's right.
And suggest what the history of Israel is. And none of the grown-ups in the Democratic Party said to them, in public at least, "You're out of your mind, and here's the history." When I raise that to people, some of them say to me, "Mark, you don't understand. You know the history. Nancy Pelosi doesn't know the history. And therefore, it's not that she knows and is keeping quiet. She just doesn't know better.
She knows enough. She knows enough.
Okay, then why does it?
And,
why do
you know, some Democrats have spoken out. My former student, Josh Gottheimer, who represents part of New Jersey, has been very outspoken.
He doesn't count.
He counts because he's
Pelosi
a young guy
counts,
who's going to
and
make it up the
Schumer
ladder.
Counts,
Yeah.
And Blumenthal counts.
Yeah.
And Cardin counts.
I wish they
and
would
Feinstein
speak.
counts.
I wish they would speak out
And
more.
by the way, it's not only Jews. The major leaders who are not Jewish in the Democratic Party have not said publicly, "This is outrageous." And I don't know
They
if
should.
they should.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm asking you, when people say to me the reason they didn't was not because they don't agree with you, Mark. They don't know any better.
I'm not sure if it's the knowledge. Knowledge is easy to get. They don't want to alienate the left wing of the party, particularly during primary season, when the left has an undue influence on electoral results.
The issues
But
of
you
the
look at
squad preceded.
Joe Biden is a very strong supporter of Israel.
Yes, he is.
I worked very closely with Ted Kennedy for 30 years. Israel never had a better friend than Ted Kennedy during that 30-year period.
No one's
He worked
arguing
with
that.
Soviet Jewry.
No one's arguing
but,
that.
And if he were still alive, he'd be standing
But
up
he's
to the
not.
squad. I know.
He's not.
I know. And I hope his nephew, Joe, who's running for the Senate, will be a leading voice in defending and standing up for Israel. Look, I'm remaining a Democrat as long as I can have influence within the Democratic Party to try to marginalize the hard left. I threatened to quit the Democratic Party when Keith Ellison ran to become the chairman, and I had an impact on having him lose his election. And I was very proud of the role I played in that. If there ever came a time when I have no influence at all, and when the Democratic Party becomes the Corbyn Party of the Labour Party in England, obviously I would have to reconsider my party affiliation. I don't want to see that ever happen in America. I want to see bipartisan support remain part of the American tradition.
American Jews who are Democrats, lifelong Democrats, have said to me for the first time they're worried that their Democratic Party could drift away from supporting Israel, and that the bipartisan support of Israel, which has been a bedrock of American foreign policy and has been wonderful for the state of Israel, that they fear bipartisan support of Israel because of the Democratic Party, the left of the Democratic Party. They worry that there could be erosion. Do you worry?
I do. Not only do I worry, I know it's true. Look at the polls. The polls show that young Democrats don't support Israel with the fervor that older Democrats and Republicans do. Bipartisanism is in danger, and that's why we have to continue to fight. I have to continue to fight within the Democratic Party to make sure that we nominate candidates who are strongly supportive of Israel. Look, I had an enormous fight with Elizabeth Warren, who I was a colleague of for 25 years, and I like her personally. But when she refused to come to hear Netanyahu speak against the Iran deal, I told her for me that was a red line. She would go and hear dictators from countries, but not America's strongest ally, Netanyahu. And but I persuaded Charlie Rangel to go and listen to the speech. And Charlie Rangel called me after it was over and said, "Thank you for urging me to do it. It was a great speech. I don't agree with all of it, but it was a great speech." So, you know, we have to push very hard for bipartisan support. I remember the time when it was the Republicans that were a problem on Israel. Eisenhower and others, and the Democrats who were, you know, Hubert Humphrey couldn't have been a stronger supporter of Israel. Things change, and we, the Jewish community, the pro-Israel community, Zionists, have to be flexible. We have to be able to adapt to changes and advocate within the Democratic Party.
When Democratic candidates running for their party's nomination, like a Bernie Sanders, and like Elizabeth Warren, and like a Pete Buttigieg, and others who have now dropped out, say that the United States should use the pressure of economic aid, however that aid might be, in whatever form it takes, should use that to pressure Israel into adopting certain policies. What's your feeling?
I think it's terrible. I think Israel has adopted the right policies. The Palestinians should be pressured to come and sit down and negotiate with no preconditions. And the idea that we should use American leverage to make Israel reduce its security needs is a terrible thing, and I don't support it. I don't care where it comes from. I could not, under any circumstances, vote for Bernie Sanders. He has supported Corbyn. He has supported an anti-Semite in Britain. And for me, he's crossed that red line. I would have to consider other Democratic candidates, but I want to maintain bipartisan support for Israel. That, for me, is the key. But the idea that the United States should use its economic leverage to reduce Israel's security is unacceptable.
I've had people on L'chaim say, and they are committed Democrats who have some intimate knowledge about how the Democratic Party works.
Yeah.
They've said to me, yes, on the far left, there's some erosion, but that the core center of the Democratic Party remains as committed to Israel as it has always been, and therefore American Jews should not worry that the Democratic Party is losing its commitment and that bipartisanship is in any danger.
They're wrong.
They're wrong?
They're just completely wrong. The hard left of the Democratic Party, including people like Stephen Cohen, who's Jewish, from Tennessee, who's outrageous when it comes to Israel, and the influence that J Street has had on many congressional candidates in Illinois and other Jewish candidates. No, there's no question that support for Israel within the hard left has disappeared. The center left is eroding. Among younger people, it's eroding. Sure, when you do the center of the older Democrats, the Schumer, Biden, they're strongly supportive of Israel, but they're not the future of the Democratic Party necessarily.
Isn't that frightening to you?
It's very frightening, and that's why I have to continue to fight as a Democrat within the party for support for Israel.
Okay, so the administration says, and you alluded to this already, but the administration says, in addition to moving the embassy to Jerusalem and recognizing Jerusalem as the capital, and as you say, it also recognized Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights.
Right.
But then Pompeo comes out and says the American administration wants to go on record, Israeli settlements are not illegal. He didn't talk about the legal.
He's right.
But yes, he's right.
Yeah.
But then 107 Democratic congressmen, only Democrats, send a letter to Pompeo in which they say they oppose this decision, and they also reference the move of the embassy to Jerusalem. They reference kicking the Palestinian embassy out of Washington, and they say these kind of decisions pose a security threat to the United States of America.
Nonsense.
I had somebody on, by the way, an Israeli on, who said to me that's the equivalent of a blood libel.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but it's just wrong. There's no security threat to the United States, number one. Number two, you have to distinguish. I have opposed Israeli settlements on the West Bank since 1970. I was the first prominent American Zionist to support the two-state solution and to oppose the building of civilian settlements. So
Tell the story about you and your mother.
Yeah, and my mother
Tell
was
the
furious
story.
at me because my Rabbi Schwartz, got up in the Young Israel and said the people who signed this letter, including me and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, were traitors to the Jewish people. It was pretty upsetting to my mother.
What'd you say to your mother?
I'm not a traitor to the Jewish people. I support the Jewish people, and I represent what I think a lot of American Jews and Israeli Jews support. Having said that, the settlements are not illegal. They're not in violation of international law. This is disputed territory. It's not technically occupied territory. It was never owned by the Palestinians. It was owned by Jordan. Jordan illegally occupied it between 1948 and 1967. And it should be resolved. It should be resolved. I now am in favor of maintaining the settlement blocks as part of Israel, but Israel giving up land equivalent so that there can be a contiguous Palestinian state. That's been my position since 1970. I am so boring. I never change my views. When you're a person of principle, it's very hard to change your views. You have to be flexible, but my basic positions have stayed the same.
Okay. What's it mean to you that 107, virtually half of the Democratic members of Congress, signed this letter? And what does it say to you? Because I said to you, is it only the fringe and the hard left? And you said those who think that are wrong.
Right.
Doesn't this letter in some way indicate you're correct?
Yes, it does. And it also indicates the increasing strength of J Street. Now, when J Street was first established, I sat down at the Y, 92nd Street Y, with Ben Ami.
And we've shown that on JBS.
And I have offered my hand, and I said, why don't you join AIPAC, become part of a liberal, anti-settlement aspect within AIPAC? No, he wanted to start his organization. And it's, Jews want to start organizations. And the organization has become increasingly influential as they move further and further to the left. And they will not allow me to speak at J Street, but they'll allow pro-BDS speakers, anti-Israel speakers, anti-Zionist speakers to speak at J Street. But a centrist speaker like me or Erwin Kotler or when Elie Wiesel was alive, J Street would never, ever allow speakers like that to try to influence their young people's minds.
By the way, is J Street anti-Israel?
No, it just is not pro-Israel. You read all of its releases, and I read them, you never hear them say anything positive about Israel. It's just not pro-Israel, and it tries to be all things to all people. It wants to appeal to the extreme left. Remember, one of the founders of J Street said it would have been better if Israel had never been established.
That's right.
And,
that's right.
And it also supported the Goldstone Report, which was a blood libel.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to mention a word to you, and it's a word that I'm constantly surprised that people don't know this word.
Mm-hmm.
Many people think that the dispute is over the West Bank,
Mm-hmm.
and they know there's something called the PLO.
Right.
Most people do not know what the letters PLO mean. They think it means Palestinian Liberation Movement, and it was the Palestine Liberation Movement.
Sure.
Do you know what year it was formed?
Yeah, in
1964.
54,
64.
Yeah, 64 rather, yeah, before the Six-Day War.
Before the Six-Day
remember that,
War.
yeah.
And the Palestine that they were talking about liberating had nothing to do with the West Bank.
Of course
okay.
not, yeah. I tell the story in my book, Defending Israel.
Yes,
and
you do.
Who the first head of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, Palestine Liberation Organization was.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
before Arafat.
But I want to get to the word nobody knows, and I want you to talk about it for me.
Right.
Okay. So in June of 67, Israel fights a defensive war against basically the United Arab League.
Right.
And it begs Jordan, don't come, you don't fire at us, we will not move into.
We will not even take the coattail.
Exactly right. Okay. And for reasons Hussein may have been tricked into, it doesn't matter. He fires on Israel, and now they're at war with Jordan, and they push all the way to the Jordan River. This is June. In less than 2 months, Levi Eshkol, the prime minister, says to the Arab League, we will turn over most of this land, and all we want from you is we will finally have a end of belligerency.
Right.
There will be a peace.
Right.
We'll live together side by side, and you will recognize the legitimacy of the Jewish state of Israel.
And then they go to Khartoum.
They go to Khartoum, the word that people don't know. They go to Khartoum, and what happens on August 1st? Well, understand, the war's in June.
Right.
Israel does this immediately.
Right.
It's September 1st, last week of August. September 1st, the United League
My birthday,
gives them the answer. What's their answer?
No negotiation, no peace, no recognition, ever, ever, ever.
Ever.
And then I work with Arthur Goldberg on UN Resolution 242, which is basically the peace treaty between Israel and the Arab states. Israel accepts 242, the Palestinians and the Arab states reject it at Khartoum, and that's the cause of the belligerency.
People have to understand, Israel had no intention originally of maintaining all of what?
Of course not.
The list. By the way, you did write with Arthur Goldberg, one of the most important United Nations resolutions.
He wrote it. I just tinkered with it.
Okay,
Yeah.
you tinkered.
Right.
But you know something about one aspect I want you to speak to.
Right.
My understanding is, when it talks about territories, it does not say the territories. And the word the was left out on purpose.
Deliberately, as a result of combination between Arthur Goldberg and Lord, I think, Carrington, who was the British ambassador to the United
And
Nations.
what's the import of that?
Because it just says it's negotiable. Some territories will be returned, others will not be returned. The contribution I made to 242 is the original draft talked about resolving the Palestinian refugee problem. I urged them to take out the word Palestinian, and instead it now says the refugee issues, or the refugee problems, meaning Jewish refugees from Arab countries, 700,000 of them.
Good for you.
And Goldberg was very proud of that because he got that change made as well.
Okay. And if somebody says to you, Alan, is it Israel's fault that there is no two-state solution today?
No, of course not. Israel offered it 38, 48, 67, 2000, 2001, 2008, and Israel's current position, even with a difficult government situation, they're prepared to sit down and negotiate a reasonable two-state solution.
So why isn't there a two-state solution?
Because the Palestinians want there not to be a Jewish state more than they want a state of their own. That's the simple answer.
Okay. So the bottom line is that the Khartoum mentality represents the Islamic fundamentalist Arab mentality to this day.
Forget about that. It represents the Christian Arab mentality to this day. Remember, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, other groups of radicals are not Muslims. So it's not only a Muslim perspective, although it was Haj al-Husseini who turned the conflict into a religious conflict, saying you can't be a Jewish presence anywhere, even a postage stamp size state in Israel.
Okay.
But the mentality still continues.
Okay. Is there anything Israel could do or give that would enable the Palestinian leadership as it is now constituted to accept the idea of a two-state solution?
I don't know. I have sat down with
You don't
Abbas.
know?
I don't know whether there's anything.
But that suggests maybe yes.
Maybe yes. Maybe yes. I can tell you, I sat down at dinner with Abbas and Erekat in a private dinner. And Abbas at least was trying to convey the impression to me that he would be willing to make a reasonable deal. Erekat was kind of hitting him the whole time, and I don't think he would be willing to make a deal. But I think there are elements within the Palestinian Authority that might be willing to make a deal. This is not the best time for it because the Israeli government is in turmoil. We'll see what happens with the next election. It would be a good time for the Palestinians because if Trump continues as president, they're not going to get a lot of support, the Palestinians, from the Trump administration or from the rest of the world. A lot of the world has given up on the Palestinians. You know, the Palestinians are strong on university campuses, but they're not strong in capitals, diplomatic centers in the world today.
You and I tend to agree so much. I disagree with you profoundly here. I don't think there's anything Israel could do, a policy it could change. It could take down every single settlement on the West Bank. There's nothing it could give.
Why not try?
Because it's silly.
Well,
Because everything else you said about the mentality represented by Khartoum,
Yeah.
as long the Palestinian cannot, it's in some way, by the way, it's not his fault. The Palestinians we're talking about who right now are in power, for them, this is an ideology that is in their soul.
yeah.
No infidel may rule, have sovereignty on Muslim
But you
land.
can make the same argument about some of the extremist Jews who live on the West Bank.
You cannot, because they're not. They don't represent the people as a whole.
They don't.
And we are a democracy. They're not a democracy.
Understand all that, but they have undue influence on Israeli politics as evidenced by the gridlock that we're now seeing. And there are certainly some fundamentalists on the West Bank who could never give up.
Yes, but it's not about an individual. And I didn't
I
say
agree with you.
Palestinians. I said leadership. By the way, Alan, if tomorrow
Yeah.
the Palestinian leadership had an about face, a sea change,
Right.
and said, yes, we will live side by side with a Jewish state of Palestine,
Right.
a Jewish state of Israel.
Right.
And the hard right in Israel said, oh, no, it's all ours, greater Israel.
Right.
The Israeli people, in a heartbeat,
Of course. And that's,
of course.
And that's clear from what
Okay.
happened in Gaza.
Right.
When the right wing didn't want to abandon Gaza,
Right.
and the Israeli soldiers went in and made them leave Gaza.
Okay, so it's not about
Yeah.
a faction of the Israeli
No,
people.
I agree with you. I'm just
Okay,
saying there are people
no, but
within Israel who
you don't-
represent the
you
same
don't
point
wanna
of view.
let because this is a J Street argument.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be heard that way. You don't want people to hear. You know what Alan Dershowitz says? Yes, there are extremists in the Palestinian side, but there are extremists on the Israeli
No,
side.
I agree with you. The extremists on the Palestinian side sit in the Oval Office there
Yes.
and run the Palestinian Authority. And if they didn't take the position they're taking, they'd be replaced. So I agree with you.
Okay, so
Yeah.
why do you say to me, this is, by the way, this is
We have to keep
fundamental
trying.
Jewish hope.
We have to keep
we
trying.
Are, it is the
Hatikva.
I know. I
Okay,
know.
the hope.
Okay, and I say to you, what's interesting to me about you
Yeah.
is that although you are committed to that, incidentally, the audience should understand, we should never stop trying.
Yeah.
The question is, what does trying mean? And what I've come to understand is, you don't smash Israel for just living its life
I
in
agree.
the meantime.
I agree. I never smash Israel, but you look, even my friend Bibi Netanyahu, who is regarded as very tough and has been ambivalent sometimes about the two-state solution. I remember when he went to Bar-Ilan University and offered the Palestinians a state, that offer is still on the table. The official Israeli position, even with our government in turmoil, the official Israeli position is come and negotiate with no preconditions. Israel will be generous, and you may very well end up with a state. I have seen the Trump peace plan. I'm not free to disclose it, but I was called in by the team to work with them on it. It is a terrific plan, but will the Palestinians accept it? Will
Why
it
do
be
you
offered?
say will to me when you know the answer is they can't?
I don't
By the
know.
way, it's not that they won't,
Yeah.
they can't.
Yeah, well, if the offer is good enough, and if the Emirates and the Gulf states and Jordan and Egypt press them, and they begin to lose the support of their wealthy allies, things may be different.
The problem is a lot of those healthy allies, wealthy allies,
Yeah.
hate Israel. And I'm not talking about just the Arab states.
Many
The
do.
Arab Emirates, by the way, may start to change.
I have sat, like I'm sitting with you, with the Emir of Qatar and his brother, and with the President of the United States. And we had long conversations about this. I'm not free to disclose the content of the conversations, but I am free to tell you that I came away encouraged. I thought that many of the Arab leaders in the Gulf area, not only Qatar, but others, Qatar plays both sides against the middle always with Iran and other places, understand that Israel helps their security. Israel is a protection against Iran. And I think that that movement of support for Israel by some of the Gulf states could help move the Palestinians in the direction that would be a positive step. Will it
Okay.
happen? I don't know.
Okay,
Nobody has ever lost money betting against peace in the Middle East.
Okay, I just find it so interesting that on the one hand, you clearly see
Yeah.
why there's been no two-state
Yeah,
solution.
yeah.
At the same time, your passion for making this
You know
work.
what they say, a pessimist in Israel is one who says, oy vey, things are so bad they can't get any worse. An optimist says, yes, they can. So I'm an optimist, not in the sense of things could get worse. They could get worse.
Okay.
But I'm an optimist in the sense that we should always try for the best solution.
Okay, but yes, that's true, but it's something of a bromide in this case for me. I was going to ask you a different question had you agreed with me that tragically, at the moment, there's nothing Israel can do. At this moment, tragically. When legislators try to work out U.S. policy vis-a-vis the Middle East in general and Israel in particular, why don't they understand what at least you and I, the places that you and I do agree, that tragically, the irredentist position of the extremists who are in total control right now,
Right.
including Hamas, which is, by the way, people tell me all the time, we think Fatah is better than Hamas. It's not. And what Abbas says in Arabic is very different than what he says to you at a dinner table, and that ultimately, as far as Abbas is concerned, when he talks about a two-state solution, it's a Arab state and a binational state. He never says there should be a Jewish state.
So I had that conversation with him.
You tell me what, before I ask you the final question here.
My conversation with him, I said, could you ever, as part of a negotiated solution, accept Israel as a Jewish state? He said, no, I can't do that, because that would, wait a minute, that would diminish the rights of Palestinians who live in Israel. I said, how about the following formulation, which I've been pressing for years? Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. He said, that's more possible. I said, are you ready to do that? Because I'll call Bibi tonight if you say you're ready to accept Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. And his answer was, it's not beyond the realm of possibility, but I'm not ready to do that now.
Well, when he calls you and says he will, then
I'll
let
call
me know.
I'll give you a call.
Yes.
Right?
And what's the distinction in your mind when you say, would it be okay to call Israel the
For
nation
me, it's
state?
a very important distinction. I don't want to see Israel based on any religious principles, any Jewish principles.
Okay, but when you and I say Israel's a Jewish state,
I understand that.
We're not talking about Torah
But
law.
I'd much prefer to say the nation state of the Jewish people,
For you and me,
because
okay.
Judaism is a
It's
nationality
not about
as well.
Judaism. It's not about Judaism.
But Jewish culture, Jewish history is all about nationality as well. So I want to see Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people with equal rights for the minority. Look, I
How is
oppose
that
the nationality law.
Doesn't that exist now?
It does, and that's why I didn't think the nationality law was a wise thing to do. I was opposed to it.
Okay,
and
but
I'm
all you're
still
saying
opposed
is,
to it.
I want Israel to be what Israel is today.
Yes, but if I want the Palestinians to recognize what Israel is, namely the nation state of the Jewish people, consisting of many people without religion, many people who are agnostic, many people who are skeptics, many people who are very religious. It's a conglomeration of Jews of all kinds.
Okay, and
Arabs.
And Abbas doesn't know that now?
He knows that.
So what's the point?
The question is, for him, it's a card that he's going to play. And my conversation with him led me to believe that with the right set of circumstances, he'd be willing to recognize Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. Again,
when he calls
it's a
you,
hope.
you'll let me know.
It's a hope.
Hatikva. I'm telling you.
Right.
And I was saying to you, are you telling me that American legislators don't understand the complexity as you and I are discussing
No,
today?
they may not understand it as we do, but they're not voting because of their lack of understanding. They're voting because of their pressure of their constituents, contributors, people from the hard left. The biggest problem is for many American Jews today who vote Democrat, Israel is not a first priority issue. It becomes a high priority issue like in '67 when Israel is in crisis, or maybe even when the Iran deal is being considered. But when Israel is relatively stable, Jews vote on climate control, on the economy, on a range of other issues. Israel ranks 4th, 5th, or 6th. And so legislators can basically neglect support for Israel in certain districts, not in other districts, and it's a work in progress. And we have to keep the pressure on to make sure that all Democrats, not the squad, but all reasonable Democrats, continue to support Israel and make Israel a bipartisan issue.
I may have not asked. I may have not been clear enough about what I'm asking, what I'm saying to you. The problem I'm defining has nothing to do with the last 4 years. I look at administration's policies over the decades.
Yeah, me too. In my book, I
yes,
do that.
you do.
Yeah.
And this has nothing to do with what's going on now. In general, there has never been, it seems to me, both in the White House or in Congress, and certainly not in the State Department, the understanding of what the real cartoon mentality is.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
And I'm asking you why.
Because the Palestinian leadership and the Arab leadership historically has wanted there not to be a Jewish state more than they've wanted there to be a Palestinian
But why
state.
why doesn't the American administration, the American legislature, understand that and say to the Palestinians, you know what? You want American support, come to the table and work it out.
And
they never do that.
Donald Trump has said that. I think
Only Donald Trump, and for some in the Jewish community, he's a pariah.
And Bill Clinton did that. Bill Clinton did that. He told the Palestinians, come to the table. They came to the table. I have to tell you, I know about a phone call between Bill Clinton and Yasser Arafat Yasser Arafat called him in his last day of office and to say what a great president he was. And Bill Clinton got on the phone and said, I could have been a great president if not for you. You destroyed it. You destroyed peace. And he hung the phone up on him. So Bill Clinton was a great friend of Israel and a great supporter of Israel and a friend of mine. And I'm proud of the fact that I helped him avoid impeachment as well, avoid removal as well. And I'm going to continue to do that based on principle, as long as my voice is in silence. And that's why I hope everybody will read my book, Guilt by Accusation, because it will persuade you that I have been falsely accused, that my voice has been improperly silenced by the 92nd Street Y, by synagogues and other places, book fairs. Do you know when my book came out defending Israel, not a single Jewish book fair invited me to speak about it?
That's impossible.
Not a single Jewish book fair. I was always the most popular book fair person. Not a single Jewish book fair invited me to speak on defending Israel, and it's all because of the false accusation.
All because of Epstein?
All because of Epstein, yeah.
It had nothing to do with Trump, you don't think?
I don't think so, because I'm talking about in the South, I'm talking about in states that voted for Trump. I think it's about Epstein, but it could be a combination of factors. But my voice will not be silenced, notwithstanding efforts to do so by Jews and non-Jews alike.
I love you so much.
Oh, thank you.
You know, and the work you do is out of this world.
I appreciate
Kol
it.
tuv v'hatzlacha all the time.
Toda rabah.
Many times together. Thank you.
Thank you. Be well.
Alan Dershowitz, whose marvelous memoir, Defending Israel, the story of my relationship with my most challenging client. It is a brilliant book. It's available on Amazon, in bookstores everywhere. If you're part of a Jewish community, this is the person you should be invited to come speak about this book and his entire perspective on Jewish life today and on issues confronting American society. If you're part of a Jewish community watching L'Chaim that is boycotting Alan Dershowitz, first of all, shame on you. And also, you're not doing yourself a favor. You're doing something that is harming the soul of the Jewish people. And I really hope that many of you now will be in touch with Alan and you'll say, whether I agree with you or not, and every one of us has the right to disagree with him on any aspect, Trump, Israel, Epstein, O.J. Simpson, it doesn't matter. But to fail to recognize the contribution he has made and continues to make to Jewish life and our collective battle in defense of Israel is a shanda. In other words, shanda, it's a shanda. That's worse than a pity. It's outrageous. I'm also very proud to tell you that this book, a marvelous book, Alan is making it available to JBS for me to offer to those of you who might want to give a special donation in support of JBS. You will receive a copy of this book personally autographed by Alan Dershowitz, Defending Israel. So for anyone who can make a donation to GEM, tax deductible, of a gift of $250 or more, this Hanukkah season and any holiday season, and as we end the year, this is the time people want to put their tax-deductible dollars, their tzedakah dollars, to the best possible use. If you support JBS at $250 or more, and you request Alan's book, Defending Israel, it will be personally autographed to you. Please be in touch with me as always. Email me, write me, post it on our Facebook page, or tweet me. I look forward to hearing from many of you. Remember to take L'Chaim with you on podcast anywhere you go. And until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'Chaim, my friends, to life.
is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. And we're especially pleased to remind you that thanks to a generous matching gift from the Cayley family, every new or increased dollar you donate to JBS will be worth double to JBS. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please, indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.